I don't tell me. Don't let me go live on the air real quick.
Yeah, we're on. We're on.
Okay, I talked to somebody in France, and he said it is really bad over there, buddy.
In what regard?
Just with all what's going on with the police and the folks running around over there. What do you call those folks that have Allah-loving folks there?
Oh, the Mohammedans?
Yeah. You know, the good people over there. One general said they had no-go zones at, and they do have places that you don't go over there.
Yeah.
Radical Islam. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of it.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Those guys?
What you call it. So, but thanks again.
Okay.
All right, have a good night. Bye.
Yo.
Another comment on the oil field.
We're on, right?
I read an article on the web the other day about these super tankers are being leased for storage purposes.
Yeah.
They're stockpiling.
Crude.
Yeah, we'd heard that they've been stockpiling crude now and finished product for a while. And so what's going to happen when it goes back up, all that stuff's being bought at the cheap price. So they're going to make up for their shortfalls by selling this stuff at the new high prices when it comes back up. Watch for it. And of course they're buying it at cut rate prices. Probably a lot of it's coming from ISIS. ISIS is selling on the black market a lot of gasoline and oil.
But that's why one of the reasons Saudi is doing what they're doing.
The interesting thing, though, about the Saudis is they're the biggest terrorist country in the world.
Yeah.
They're bigger than all the rest of them combined.
Exactly.
With the amount of money they supply and the people that they are accommodating, the Saudi Arabians are the worst terrorists in the world.
Exactly.
That's the Bush's hand holding them.
Yeah, the Bush's hand is holding them, and the CIA's hand is holding them. Again, the stuff going on behind the scenes, folks, is nothing compared to. I mean, it's far beyond what you know, what you have any awareness of. But CNN, MSNBC, all those guys have no clue as to what goes on, or if they do, they better not talk about it, or they wind up JFK'd, or like some other people have recently been assassinated.
Did you see the walls they're building?
Where?
In Saudi.
Oh, the Saudis are running scared. That's one reason they're kowtowing to these terrorists.
Did you see the walls they're
No.
building? I'll tell you what, we need to get that design. You ain't. I saw it. It was on Facebook, and I'm telling you, it's 3 layers, and if you get through that,
You're good, huh? Well,
I said down here we could build those walls in the very front section. We can get rid of a lot of our gator overpopulation, and just put 600 miles of gators. Feed them occasionally. The word would spread quick.
Yeah.
I fell over the wall. I saw my brother fall over the wall, and then he disappeared.
Yep.
And no shots were fired.
Okay, let's come back to that in a second. The second hour has begun, and we were talking to a caller there through the break, and we'll come back to his comments in a second. Heavenly Father, give us the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to do your will in all things. In Jesus the Christ's name we pray. Amen. Next Freedom Forum meeting on February 5th at Elise's. And then this Saturday in Baton Rouge from 10 to 4 is the big rally, which y'all need to go at Pete Maravich Center. Go to American Family Association, AFA website for details there.
Mr. Ray, you can
And
call him.
Ray Green's meeting on the Constitution at Thomas Park, 10 a.m. Why did I put p.m.? Well, 10 a.m. Saturday.
A lot of people show up at 10 p.m.
Yeah. And then next Acadiana Patriots meeting is a week from the 5th, which is going to be 12th.
February 12th. Got a young lady going to speak that night. African-American lady gonna talk about pro-life. She's very involved in that, and she's also gonna give her story on why she changed from Democrat to Republican,
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
which will be very interesting.
Yeah.
And then the other topics we're trying to get to, haven't quite gotten that settled in yet. Go ahead, caller.
This is Don. Tom, you know my friend Miguel, he's a pretty good researcher. He said the Swiss banks, are used as a refuge for people who are worried about the currencies. And a good place to put money, Well, the interest rate they'll no longer give an interest rate. They give a negative interest rate. If you want to put your money in their banks, like you pay 2% or 5% or whatever.
Yeah.
In order to then they'll let you put your money in their banks. So he said the reason for this is the financial markets and the international bankers are even themselves getting scared, trying to find a safe refuge to put their money. So he said that's a sign that the end's going to come, but he said it's a sign that we're a lot closer to the end. You know what I'm talking about?
Well,
Okay.
this
Anyway,
year is
have a
going to
good
be
day.
critical. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. I'd heard this. I forgot about that. The Swiss are now charging negative interest rates on their deposits because they're safe, and people are the big moneyed people are willing to put their money in those banks and pay a couple of percentage rates, whatever, to keep their money safe. Well, that's why people I know are taking their money out of the banks and they're getting it in cash, Federal Reserve notes right now. And then, of course, from there you get into beans, bullets, and Band-Aids after that. The Federal Reserve notes are not really worth anything. Right now you can trade them for useful stuff, and I would still advocate trading all the Federal Reserve notes you can for useful stuff. And I've sent out things to people on my email list. If you want to get on there and find out some of the things beyond, there's all kind of things you need to lay in that are going to be good. Of course, some people insist on silver and gold. The problem with that is you have to find somebody that has something useful when you want to trade your silver and gold for something to eat. You've got to find somebody that's got enough food and is willing to do that for something they can't eat. If things get bad enough, silver and gold will not be that useful, except for melting down into bullets. And that'll be a little expensive. So put that under your hat and think about it, folks. There is a culture war going on in the country, and part of that, of course, is what I mentioned in the first hour, this income inequality, and our caller suggested that we mention this little tidbit. If you were to take our welfare recipients, in other words, the so-called poorest people in the country, which are not, by the way, the poorest people in the country, welfare recipients in some states are getting $20,000, $30,000 worth of benefits.
Hawaii, it's over 50.
And so, yeah, so we'd mentioned the top states a while back had a chart. Jim had a chart of the states and how much people were getting in total benefits, the average. And as the caller suggested, if you took those people and threw them in with the top, or with the population of the whole world in its entirety, they would, in all likelihood, be in the top 10 to 15% of the richest people in the world. Now, yeah, there'd be people that are phenomenally richer, but we're saying the top 10 to 15% of the richest people in the world, our welfare recipients would be there. And this is what I've told you before. Our welfare recipients, you personally are living better than the kings and queens of Europe did in the 1500s, in the 1300s, throughout that period in history. You're healthier, you're eating better, you don't suffer from the vagaries of the weather. Do you know these cold stone castles in Europe? The purpose of a tapestry was to try and insulate those cold stone walls from the cold outside for the folks inside, and had great big hearths, big fires burning in the middle of the room, not on the side, in the middle of the room to keep the whole room warm. So, hey, you're a lot better off than those folks were. You gotta put this into perspective, and this notion of income inequality is not in perspective in this country, because we've got far more wealth on the books than we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, certainly, 5 years ago. There's far more wealth on the books now, has been created artificially by the debt monetary system we've got in this country. And Jim's got an interesting take on that from the White House.
Valerie Jarrett was confronted on the White House own unequal pay for women. Republican businesswoman Carla Fiorina confronted top White House advisor Valerie Jarrett Wednesday over the White House own unequal pay for women. Despite President Barack Obama's consistent refrain of equal pay for equal work, the White House itself has come under fire for paying women less than male colleagues. A July analysis from the Washington Post found that the average male White House employee, man, I need to be one of these people, $88,600 a year, while the average female employee was making $78,400. Gee whiz. I think certainly every woman on this panel and every woman across the nation agrees that equal pay for equal work is absolutely required. I also think it's just a fact that laws exist on the books today, and if a woman is being discriminated against because of her gender, she should use the full extent of the law. I'm going to read this whole thing because the very last statement is very interesting. I am struck by the fact that the president hasn't really led in this regard, she continued. He's not paying women equally by his own measures in the White House. I'm also struck by the fact that the single greatest impediment to equal pay for equal work is this seniority system, which pays not on merit, not on performance, but on time and grade. Why wouldn't that White House take on the seniority system and say, let's pay women by the merit and by the results? Because based on my own experience in those scenarios, women would be paid equally. Now comes the kicker. This is really how Washington works. Jarrett responded with a flat denial. Go figure. Let's unpack your question a little bit. So first of all, the first question and last question, let's weave them together. In the White House, women do earn equal pay for equal work. She never answered the question. I mean,
Wait, let me see how she's weaving this. She must, that's where Common Core came from.
yeah, she must have grew up on Common Core somewhere in another foreign country.
Jesus.
There's other comments that came that I read further on. I didn't print them, but I mean, the people. Actually, some of those comments I couldn't have said on the air.
That's how Congress looks at minimum wage. They have interns that they don't pay anything.
Yeah.
When they're asked about, well, what about minimum wage?
Well, minimum wage.
Well, the thing is, minimum wage was never designed to be a family income.
Where'd I put that article?
My point is, it's critical.
Yeah. Well, this right, the minimum wage stuff needs to be put into perspective too, and I got an article about that. Minimum wage is for high school and college students who are just making enough money for spending money to put a little toward tuition and books perhaps, et cetera. It's not made for a mother of three to be able to raise 3 children. If it were, shame on her, okay? She needs to be doing something far greater with her life than that. A burger flipper making minimum wage, they want to now make it $15 an hour. This is the call by the left-wingers in Obama last night. That would put them in the $30,000 bracket. A private in the military, in the Army and the Marine Corps, makes, what was it, that article, is $16,000 a year, something
Yeah.
like that.
Serving 24 hours a day,
Yeah,
365
he's not getting
days a
paid
year.
by the hour, okay, because if he were, he'd be making far more than that. But this is his base pay, he's not getting paid by the hour, he's salaried, as it were. And yet, he's gotta do 24 hours a day, sometimes 3-4 weeks at a time in the field, fighting bad guys, getting shot at, et cetera, living in squalid conditions. Will his burger flipper do the same thing for his $15 an hour? No, he won't. So you got to put this stuff in perspective. It's like what happened to the military when they started bringing in all these older folks after the World Trade attack. They raised the maximum age. They started taking people who, if they could pass the physical, if they could do the physical stuff, it didn't matter if they were, I think it went up to 42 years old. Well, that was ridiculous because the pay scale stayed the same. And the pay scale will not support a family. It'll support the private, period, until he gets time and grade and becomes older and is making enough money to afford a family when he's about 5 years down the road and about 22, 23 years old. Then he's making enough money to afford a wife. And a couple of years later, a couple of children have come along and he's getting more pay, et cetera. He can afford the children. But they were bringing families in. They were bringing guys in with 3 or 4 children. No wonder they had to go on welfare. You got to put this stuff into perspective, people. They should never have allowed these people to bring their families in with them. If they were going to bring them in, if they wanted to come in, fine, but you don't bring your family on post with you. There's no way they can afford that. Leave them home. Leave them with their parents, what have you. But some of these people, oh, they got in their patriotic fervor, oh, we're going to bring the family too. No, So you got to put this in perspective. Now,
I was paid in the military when I went in 1964, $82 a month.
we got half the pay of a second lieutenant and could not marry. If we got married, we got kicked out.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You could not be married. Okay. The culture war is continuing. Now, you know what's happened with Fat Boy Michael Moore and his talking about the sniper movie.
He blamed that on his dad. He said his dad told him that.
Well, he also said his dad was shot by, or his granddad was shot by a sniper in the Pacific. There's some doubt about that. You can't find the records.
Well, go for
But the culture war, this touches upon that. Now, I'm not an apologist for the military, but fair is fair. Here's got an article, Green Beret slams Gwyneth Paltrow. There's a big difference between real war and Twitter. Now, we'd heard about what she had said, and this is very timely when it comes to life in general. The real world, folks. Let me tell you what I said to start with. I doubt the media darling featured here gets to read this. Her agent, etc., will do like Obama's do and be sure the real world does not creep into her reality. Wait until there's no more Facebook, etc., and see a real meltdown of the zombies, elite as well as lowly. From Doug Giles, there's a response regarding our morning's Gwyneth Paltrow post from my good buddy in Green Beret, Brian Sykes. Sergeant First Class, United States Army, Brian Sykes. To Miss Paltrow, I'd first like to start out by saying how terrible I feel for you and all your friends that on a daily basis have to endure mean words written by people you don't know. Let me stop here and say, I've known people on Facebook that got on Facebook and were upset when somebody unfriended them. So what?
What?
They even asked me, because at the time I was on it, and I didn't even read the stuff. I didn't read Facebook at all. I was on it merely to be able to order some stuff from some of these clowns that put stuff on there that you got good deals if you, but come on, people. Okay? Upset because of what somebody said about them on Facebook.
Oh my God.
All right, well, that's as bad as what the Muslims are doing. But I can only imagine the difficulty of waking up in a 12,000 square foot Hollywood home and having your assistant retrieve your iPhone only to see that the battery is low and someone on Twitter, the social media concept that you and all of your friends contribute to on an hourly basis to feed your ego in narcissistic ways, has written a mean word or two about you. You've hit the nail on the head. War is exactly like that. You should receive a medal for the burden you have carried on your shoulders due to these meanies on social media. You said, quote, it's almost like how in war you go through this bloody dehumanizing thing and then something is defined out of it, unquote. I could see how you and others like you in the biz could be so insecure and mentally weak that you could pair the difficulty of your life on Twitter to my brothers who've had their limbs ripped off and seen their friends shot, blown up, burned, disfigured, etc., while just starting the day is a challenge. How about our wives, the ones that sign on to be there for us through thick and thin, that help us to shake the hardships of war upon our return, and do all this while being mothers to our children, that help us keep the bills in order because we are always gone, and keeping our lives glued together. They do all this, by the way, without a team of accountants, nannies, personal assistants, and life coaches. Yeah, reading a mean tweet is just like all that. You know, that's really dehumanizing, Miss Paltrow. The fact that you'd even consider that your life as an A-list celebrity reading internet comments could even compare to war and what is endured on the battlefield. You and the other A-listers that think like you are laughable. You all have actually convinced yourselves that you in some way will face difficulty on a regular basis. Let me be the first to burst your bubble. A long line at Starbucks, your driver being 3 minutes late, a scuff mark on your $1,200 shoes, and a mean tweet. And I might add, and somebody texting you back an hour after you texted them. In other words, texting you later than you think you should be texted, do not constitute difficulty in the eyes of a soldier. Understand me when I say this. War does not define me. It's a chapter in my life that helped shape me. Being a husband and father is what defines me. Remember, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never be close to what war is.
Amen.
And
Well
I say
said.
amen to that. And
Well said.
this is something that people need to take into account. All of these little piddling problems. Why do you see people, how many times do you see people texting while they're driving on the highway, on the
Oh.
interstate at 75 miles an hour?
I'll tell
and
you
they're
what.
texting.
It's more than what you can believe. I mean, I travel around the state, I can tell you, and I can tell the characteristics of the car. I mean, a car might be traveling in the same direction as I do for miles and miles at 70, 75 miles an hour, and all of a sudden I'm passing them.
Yeah.
And when I look over, there it is.
Yeah,
I've
folks.
told people, if you text me and you don't get an answer, that means I can't answer you. I don't even look at the text when I'm driving.
See, I'm not getting upset because this beastie here is cutting me off every time I do try to change back to read you something that it's cutting me off. Oh well, that's one of the vagaries of these things, so you got to accept it. Yeah, all of this stuff, all these little gewgaws. There's another article that I sent out. What are these people going to do? People like Gwyneth Paltrow and others, when the power goes out and they can't do all of this stuff. We've talked to y'all about this before, but it bears repeating. And this is where the culture war comes in. There's people that are going to go nutso. If you're one of them, then you'd better get your life in order, okay? You'd better order your priorities. because reality is not what's on your Facebook. It's not what's on your texting machine, whatever the heck that is. What do they text on these days? An iPad or iPhone thing?
iPad, you name it.
So the bottom line is that, see what it keeps doing? This is a culture war, folks, that's going on here. Or call it a reality check. Another thing that keeps coming up, and this one is good, dealing with the current situation in the world. This explains much. Why does history repeat itself?
Yeah. That
Because
was a good
humans
argument.
are the same in the past, now, and in the future. While the causes or isms and the actors or the victims may change, the reasons, results, and history remains the same. While I'm reading this to you, keep in mind the current state of this country and reflect deeply, O silent ones. Have a blessed day.
This was.
A man whose family was German aristocracy prior to World War II owned a number of large industries and estates. When asked how many German people were true Nazis, the answer he gave can guide our attitude toward fanaticism. Put this in context, people. Context of what's going on in the Muslim world and context what's going on in your world. Very few people were Nazis, he said, but many enjoyed the return of German pride, and many more were too busy to care. I was one of those who just thought the Nazis were a bunch of fools, so the majority just sat back and let it happen. Then before we knew it, they owned us. We had lost control, and the end of the world had come. My family lost everything. I ended up in a concentration camp, and the Allies destroyed my factories. Quote, we're told again and again by experts and talking heads that Islam is the religion of peace and that the vast majority of Muslims just want to live in peace. Although this unqualified assertion may be true, it's entirely irrelevant. It is meaningless. Fluff meant to make us feel better, of course, especially the left-wingers and the touchy, feel-good, politically correct folks, and meant to somehow diminish the specter of fanatics rampaging across the globe in the name of Islam. The fact is that the fanatics rule Islam at this moment in history. It is the fanatics who march. It's the fanatics who wage any one of the 50 shooting wars worldwide. Did you know that, folks? 50 wars are raging worldwide. And guess what? Not a one has not got Muslims on one side or the other. And every one of them, the Muslim side is the aggressor. In every one of them. Except one. I'll qualify that and say that probably not the one in, no, let me back up. There's another one. Okay, the one that the Muslims are not the aggressors necessarily is in Chechnya. The Russians are the aggressors. But the Russians and the Ukrainians, neither side there is Muslim, so I got to back off of that. But the rest of these shooting wars are Muslim instigated. So 48 of the 50 shooting wars worldwide. It's the fanatics who systematically slaughter Christian or tribal groups throughout Africa and are gradually taking over the entire continent in an Islamic wave. It's the fanatics who bomb, behead, murder, or honor kill. It's the fanatics who take over mosque after mosque. It's the fanatics who zealously spread the stoning and hanging of rape victims and homosexuals. It's the fanatics who teach their young to kill and to become suicide bombers. The hard, quantifiable fact is that the peaceful majority, the silent majority, is cowed and extraneous. In fact, in these villages that ISIL is taking over, the people that are deemed inappropriate or not good enough Muslims. In fact, where was it? ISIL just murdered. I wish they'd quit using things like assassinated and executed. Just say what it is. It's murder. They just murdered some teenage boys.
18.
For using, for playing music on a keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
on a keyboard device. It was not a Muslim-approved musical instrument, so
But
they
it was
executed them.
18 teenagers.
18 of them?
Yeah, but they weren't all playing, they were just enjoying.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
that's what
well.
you want, America. Oh,
Communist Russia was comprised of Russians who just wanted to live in peace. Yet the Russian communists were responsible for the murder of about 20 million people. And that's a low number. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. China's huge population was peaceful as well, but Chinese communists managed to kill a staggering 70 million. That's probably pretty close. The average Japanese individual prior to World War II was not a warmongering sadist, yet Japan murdered and slaughtered its way across Southeast Asia in an orgy of killing that included the systematic murder of 12 million Chinese civilians, most killed by sword, shovel, and bayonet. And by the way, there's a movie playing right now on Movieplex about the rape of Nanking. You need to look at that. You'll see, oh, these Japanese soldiers, they're reluctant to kill innocent Chinese, but they do. They do it anyway. Why? Again, it's the militaristic mentality. They've become ants, non-thinking ants. And who can forget Rwanda, which collapsed into butchery? Could it not be said that the majority of Rwandans were peace-loving? History lessons are often incredibly simple and blunt. Yet for all the powers of reason, we often miss the most basic and uncomplicated of points. Peace-loving Muslims have been made irrelevant by their silence. Peace-loving Muslims will become our enemy if they don't speak up, because like my friend from Germany, they will awaken one day and find that fanatics own them, and the end of their world will have begun. Peace-loving Germans, Japanese, Chinese, Russians, Rwandans, Serbs, Afghans, Iraqis, Palestinians, Somalis, Nigerians, Algerians, and many others have died because the peaceful majority did not speak up until it was too late. Now, Islamic prayers have been introduced into Toronto and other public schools in Ontario, and yes, in Ottawa too, while the Lord's Prayer was removed due to being so offensive.
mm-hmm. It's happening right here.
The Islamic way may be peaceful for the time being in our country until the fanatics have got us where they want us. In Australia, and indeed in many countries around the world, many of the more commonly consumed food items have the halal emblem on them. Just look at the back of some of the most popular chocolate bars and other food items in your local supermarket. Food and aircraft has the halal emblem just to appease the privileged minority who are now rapidly expanding within the nation's shores. In the UK, Muslim communities refuse to integrate, and there are now dozens of no-go zones within major cities across the country that the police force dare not intrude upon. Sharia law prevails there because the Muslim community in those areas refuses to acknowledge British law. Now this is an Englishman talking here, folks, or Canadian. He's talking about this from his perspective on the ground there. He's not a CNN apologist. As for us who watch it all unfold, we must pay attention to the only group that counts, the fanatics who threaten our way of life. Lastly, anyone who doubts that the issue is serious and deletes this without sending it on is contributing to the passiveness that allows the problems to expand. So extend yourself a bit and send this on and on and on, and let us hope that thousands worldwide read this and think about it and send it on before it's too late. And I sent that out to 200 people.
Yep, I forwarded it also.
So,
When you read through that, when you read through the whole, when I read through it, I'm sitting there going, a lot of similarities.
yeah.
A lot of similarities.
Well, again, it is history repeating itself. One of these left-wingers on one of the talk shows on CNN or MSNBC, I told you all about it several months ago, he actually said, oh, all these people that say history repeats itself, they're full of bull. History doesn't repeat itself. You don't have Adolf Hitler preaching at the Reichstag in Germany. And this guy was educated, okay? No, he was an academician who suffers from a severe case of cognitive dissonance. These people are so wrapped up in themselves and their superiority that if something disagrees with their preconceived notion, that's okay. It doesn't exist. It's like so many in the academic world these days, not just political science, sociology, but also in the sciences. There's stuff that's being found constantly in the archaeological world that defies previous notions of who were the first people here, the first modern people here on this continent. Well, they came from both sides. The Vikings were here, okay? The Chinese were here, the Polynesians were here, all kinds of people were here long before Columbus. But you see, the evidence that has been found about this has either disappeared or they're ignoring it. Again, it's just another example of academics at work. Just because they've got a PhD doesn't mean they know what they're doing, folks. And like this guy that says, this historian that says history doesn't repeat itself. What a crock. Human beings are human beings. That's why I started this article with what I did. Because humans are the same in the past, now, and in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
No doubt about it.
The only change is when people submit to our Heavenly Father, Jehovah, the only Heavenly Father there is. There is no Allah as such. He's not a God. He's a demon. Buddha was a philosopher. He wasn't a god. Why do they worship all of these statues of him? Think about it, etc. So, folks, are we turning into Nazi Germany? Somebody that I've known for several years now, when I first met him, he told me, he'd watched the show, and when we met, he told me, he said he'd always wondered about how the Germans, an educated, very cosmopolitan country at the time, how they fell for Adolf Hitler. And he just looked around and saw what was happening in this country. And this was years ago. I met him, 10 years ago maybe. And he saw the same things happening back then that happened in Nazi Germany. Again, it's because of our culture, et cetera, that it didn't happen in the same way. The Germans were easier, and they had a cause. They had World War I to blame for their troubles and what the Allies did to them in World War I with the Versailles Treaty. And many very astute observers of the historical scene said back then that the Versailles Treaty would result in a Second World War because of the way Germany was treated. And the Germans, you got to either defeat the Germans completely or treat them as equals. The Versailles Treaty did not do that. We defeated them completely and then treated them as equals on the economic scene and turned Germany into the powerhouse of Europe as it is now. However, I have been told by people over there that if it weren't for the U.S. military in Germany today, to this day, even with everything that they've got going for them, they would turn into the Fourth Reich. They would bring back an Adolf Hitler if the U.S. military was not there. He had Germans thanking him. He was in the army. The guy that was telling me this, he had them thanking him for being there because of that. They recognized that. He said that they were very regimented even then. And this was a few years ago, but even now they're very regimented. And they celebrate Adolf Hitler's birthday in the small towns. They close the town off so that no outsiders know they're doing it. And he was allowed to be there because he knew very well some of the locals. So they snuck him in and let him participate, let him see what was going on. They were celebrating. What?
No-go zone.
Yeah, it was a no-go zone, basically. And the cops were involved. The cops knew it. They had the places cordoned off. And so Hey, history repeats itself, folks. It doesn't have to be the name Adolf Hitler. It could be the name Osama bin Laden. No, wrong one. Obama. Barack Hussein Obama could be the name. It rhymes with Adolf Hitler, doesn't it? And he wants to be a dictator. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That thing last night was a classic example of it.
That was a socialistic review.
Yeah, and by the way, Adolf Hitler was a similar orator to Barack Hussein Obama. Adolf Hitler's crap he pulled, and I've heard that, I've seen the translations of his speeches to these massive audiences of 1 million people in these the Nuremberg party rallies.
I saw that.
And it was garbage. It was crap that he was saying. Okay, it was just rhetoric. It's all it was. Well, he was such a good orator, though. He practiced. He had somebody train him. They took pictures, close-up pictures of him while he was doing this, so he could practice his facial features, etc., his expressions. And they didn't have television back then. Okay, they had the movies though. So he didn't say crap. But he did it in such a way. They didn't care what he said. He said it all in Mein Kampf, but very few of the Allied leaders read Mein Kampf, My Story, which he wrote when he was in prison, which said everything he wanted to do. But they didn't believe it. They didn't, that's not going to happen. Oh well. So, what we got? Okay. The situation, folks, out there is getting pretty grim. But there's some people doing something about it. The League of Women Toters. This was out of the Advocate Sunday, if you saw it. Almost the full page of a lady with a revolver that has a laser on it. Permits point to soaring numbers of Louisiana women arming themselves. In the terminology, you go girl. I don't like using that, but y'all understand it, so I'm going to use it in this case. Louisiana, year 2000, concealed carry permits for women 228. In the year 2013, 5,768. In just 13 years. Skyrocketing number of women are buying guns. In Louisiana, the growing interest among women, especially for self-defense, is shown by the number of concealed carry permits. 14% of those issued went to women in 2000, 228. 17% in 2005, spiked to 26% in 2012, 32% in 2013. Raw numbers showed how quickly gun ownership among women is going up. 2012, 2,560. 2013, 5,768, double. 25 times the number who got permits in 2000. The trend is following a soaring national rate of gun ownership since '06. In 2011, Gallup polls showed women who report gun ownership hit a new high of 43%, with 23% of women reported they personally own guns. In other words, 43% of the women polled said there were guns in the household, with 23% of the women polled saying they owned them themselves. Industry analysts say fears of gun restrictions following mass shootings or the election of politicians perceived as hostile to gun rights are a big factor in the overall increase in gun sales. Self-protection appears to be the driving force for women. Yeah. There's a realization among people now that the police cannot protect you, said Tony Vecchiello, owner of Baker Range, gun range that also sells firearms. You don't get your policeman, so people are starting to realize that as this violent crime increases, it's up to you to defend yourself, unquote. I wonder if they quoted him correctly. Anyway, quote, I see more women coming in now than they used to, said Brian Blake of Accurate Firearms in Baton Rouge. This would be a place they would usually avoid because it's guns. They have an interest in it now. They understand they have a need to defend themselves and protect their families. Until about 9 years ago, Shannon Maggio never owned a gun and was happy to keep it that way. Crime concerns changed her mind. When we would go out on our sales calls, we'd have to call in when we made it back to the office, and they'd send out somebody to get us from our car to walk us in. Said Maggio, 37, of Baton Rouge, who worked downtown. There were shady characters walking around, and it was generally not a safe environment. My dad got his generator stolen, my mom got hers stolen, my things were chaotic and a little bit scary at the time. Can you imagine stealing the generator out of a car? I guess that's what she's talking about here. She took a class in gun basics. I loved it, she said. I loved everything about it. It was empowering, and I liked the smell of gunpowder, and I liked the feel of it. You know, you're in control of everything. If you want to shoot it, when you want to pull the trigger, where you want it to aim, unquote. I love the smell of gunpowder in the morning. Black powder is even more enjoyable, but I don't get to shoot black powder anymore. Shortly afterward, Maggio bought her first firearm, a Smith & Wesson bodyguard revolver. It was not her last. The single mother and pharmaceutical sales representative now participates in competitions and practices weekly at a local range. Katie Redding, 39, of Baton Rouge, never handled weapons until she took a concealed carry class 8 years ago. Memories of the serial killings from the 01-03 that led to Derek Todd Lee's murder conviction motivated her decision to purchase a Glock 19. The crime in Baton Rouge is so horrible, said Redding, sales director for a specialty publishing company. I wanted something I felt comfortable protecting myself with when Chuck, her husband, was out of town. I wouldn't say I'm a gun enthusiast. I don't have an arsenal by any means. I know how to use the one handgun I've got to its ability. And that's the key, folks. Numbers don't do you any good if you don't know how to use one of them properly. It'd be nice if you knew how to use multiples, but know how to use one properly. And again, of course, the first thing is finger off the trigger.
Talked about that.
So you're ready to shoot.
Don't.
Owning a handgun is enhanced if a woman selects a gun she'll be comfortable with, Vicchiolo said. The right grip size, the gun's weight and barrel length affect comfort. The amount of recoil that's felt and aiming. Most women who want handguns choose revolvers because they operate more simply and are less likely to jam than semi-auto pistols. The downside is a revolver only has 5 shots in it, he said. Well, that's these hideout, like the one shown in the picture I showed you on the front. Those little concealed carry 38s, most of them are only 5 shot. I believe, he says, if you teach a woman how to shoot a semi-auto, there's absolutely no problem with a woman having a semi-auto, but it involves a skill set that you need to be taught, and it requires more practice than a revolver does. A revolver, you can pick it up and pull the trigger and it shoots, unquote. And he's correct about that. It takes more training on a pistol than it does on a revolver, is the bottom line. But it's vital that you get the training, that you learn to shoot the thing properly. Revolver has more limited ammunition capacity, and it takes longer to reload. And if you're faced with multiple assailants, 3 guys busting in your door at 11 o'clock at night, and you ladies are there alone at home, and all you got your 5-shot 38 with plus P loads in it, and you've got 5 shots and there's 3 bad guys. Not good odds. Now, in most cases, once the bad guys realize you're armed after the first one gets shot or shot at, they will leave the house. Most cases. But more and more of these cases are becoming bloody. They're not leaving after the first one gets shot. So keep that in mind, folks. Worst case is those 3 guys will not stop when one of them gets shot at. Even if one of them is hit. There's been case after case where the one getting hit, he's on PCP. He doesn't even know he's been hit till the next day when he dies.
Interesting.
It's also vital for any gun owner to practice enough to be confident with the firearm, Vicchiello said. Redding agreed, especially as gun ownership increases. It's kind of scary, she said. I hope they're responsible. I hope they know exactly what they're doing. And of course, this is the key, responsibility. With the firearm comes the responsibility to adequately train with it, to know what it's capable of, to know what you're capable of when using it, to know how to function the thing in all aspects. Not just pulling the trigger, that's merely the final outcome. But before that, you've got to know how to clean it, how to load it and unload it, and to do it under stress. How many of you have speed loaders for your revolvers? Oh, what's a speed loader? Oh, come to our meeting, I'll tell you. If you don't care, well, just shoot your 5 rounds into those 3 guys and hope that you hit all 3 of them in the dark in a vital place. Okay. 5 whole minutes. Now we'll take a quick cartoon break.
Here, cartoon. Hey, cartoon.
Yes. Mallard Fillmore, they come up with some good stuff. A single pane this time, with a guy with his feet propped up watching the television. From the television, we're not sure if this story we're reporting actually happened, but to increase awareness, we're going to assume it did. Well, folks, this is critical these days. We discussed this last week, I believe, about the, if I'd remembered, I had that one, I'd have pointed it out, about the fact that these media types have got to get a jump on everybody else. And when they do that, they run the risk of not checking everything. It's like what happened with the Ferguson, Missouri shooting. That was a classic example. CNN and some others jumped into it right away, especially MSNBC. Jumped into it right away and talked to these people that claimed to be witnesses with what happened, and claimed that the guy that was killed had his back to the cop that shot him, had his hands up. Okay, that's where this "don't shoot" thing came from, that everybody's mimicking.
Hands up, don't shoot.
Yeah, hands up, don't shoot.
The other one is, I can't breathe.
Hey, what? Oh, I can't breathe, yeah. Folks, the media has got to settle down on this stuff. Of course, this is typical. They've done this for centuries, literally.
Sales advertising.
Yeah, it sells advertising. So, I mean, the adverlier would not be around if it weren't for that. I mean, excuse me, the advertiser. But on the other side of the coin, whoa. What else you got while I'm coughing
Not
here?
much, just my lady friend here, the Iranian, Valerie Jarrett says, regime's ISIS strategy is working. Their goal must be a stronger ISIS. I love the headlines.
Jeez.
Jake Tapper interviews Obama's Iranian-born senior advisor, Valerie Jarrett, and rather than asking her why terrorism has exploded under his regime, Tapper asks more diplomatic and more easily talked around questions, which generally refer to the same thing. I mean, he basically, even with the airstrikes being carried out, the U.S. coalition, this group doesn't seem to be degraded or destroyed much at all. Is it possibly time for a different strategy? And it's just, when you read stuff like this, it's just one lie after another. I mean,
No, they are being degraded. There's some ways we've heard personally, or kind of in the independent realm.
but it isn't what we're
Certain things
doing.
that are happening.
But they're telling the people not to worry about them.
Well, here's the thing, though, on both sides of the coin. The British SAS is sending small units in and sniping ISIS from a distance. Now, they reported on some of this in one regard this week. One of the alternative media sources said that the British troops were going up front to the front lines to check on their maps and see if the training they'd been doing was accurate as far as the mapping went.
Wow.
And they got fired upon by mortars and machine guns from ISIS. And they returned fire with sniper rifles and took out all the ISIS guys. Okay, well, I got something since then, today I believe, that kind of shows a little more of the picture. The British SAS is going in behind the lines in the big twin rotor helicopters, the big monsters, and they got little carts, little dune buggies that they're taking in there, and it's just snipers. They're going in and they're going behind the lines and sniping ISIS right and left in Iraq. So this wasn't what they said it was.
Cowards.
Cowardly. No, this is correct use of sniper. This is what snipers are for.
No, I'm just,
But anyway,
you know what.
there's other stuff going on over there, but it's a very interesting situation. I think